I brought flowers and anniversary tickets to my husband's office because I thought he had forgotten how to be happy with me. It was our 10th anniversary. I had booked 2 first-class tickets to Florence, 4 nights at the same tiny hotel where we stayed before the company, before the cameras, before my husband learned to smile like a man being watched. I carried white roses wrapped in charcoal paper because Julian hated red roses and always said white ones looked like a promise someone meant to keep. At 11:38 that morning, I walked into the glass lobby of Varel Systems with flowers in one hand and a cream envelope in the other. The receptionist smiled and asked, "Are you here for the engagement celebration?" I thought she meant someone from accounting. Then I heard applause. 200 employees stood in the atrium beneath gold balloons and a banner that said, "Congratulations, Julian and Celeste." On the small stage near the living wall, my husband stood beside Celeste Vale, the company's CFO, holding a velvet ring box. He dropped to one knee. She covered her mouth. The crowd screamed. And the man I had kissed goodbye that morning slid a diamond onto another woman's finger. I stood frozen while my flowers sagged in my hand. Then Julian saw me. His face went white. Celeste followed his gaze and looked at me with polite confusion, as if I were an investor's assistant who had wandered into the wrong moment. I understood then that he had not just cheated, he had erased me. So I turned around and walked out. In the parking garage, I canceled Florence, froze every joint account, called my attorney. Then I made one final call to the trustee of my father's estate. "Terminate the patent license," I said. He went silent. "Sloan, that will stop the acquisition. I know. It may freeze their whole platform." I looked at the flowers dying on the passenger seat. Then they should have remembered who owns the heart of it. 37 minutes later, my phone showed 164 missed calls. Then my doorbell rang. My name is Sloan Avery, and for 10 years I was the wife people thanked in speeches but forgot in rooms. Julian and I built Varel Systems together. That sentence matters because, by the time he proposed to Celeste in front of the whole company, most people believed he had built it alone. He was the public founder, the keynote speaker, the man in the magazines. He had the voice that made investors lean forward. He could turn a half-finished product into a vision just by standing near a screen and using words like revolution, ethical infrastructure, and trust at scale. I had the thing that made the vision possible. A patent portfolio my father left me. My father, Dr. Elliot Avery, spent 27 years developing a data compression and diagnostic routing method for rural hospital networks. It was not glamorous technology, not the kind people clap for at launch parties, but it allowed medical devices with poor connectivity to transmit critical readings without losing integrity. That meant small clinics, ambulances, mobile care vans, and underfunded hospitals could share patient data faster and more safely. When Dad died, the patents moved into the Avery Biomedical Trust. I became the beneficial controller. The trustee, Martin Hale, handled legal administration. Julian licensed the patents through Virel when the company was still 12 people, 3 desks, and a server rack that overheated every Friday. Back then, Julian understood. He used to say, "Your father built the engine. We are building the car." That word disappeared slowly, first from press releases, then investor decks, then interviews, then conference speeches. By year 5, Julian was saying things like, "When I invented the Virel framework," while I sat at gala tables smiling so tightly my jaw ached. I told myself marriage was not a competition. That was my mistake. Marriage should not be a competition, but it should never require one person to vanish so the other can look taller. Celeste arrived 18 months before the proposal. She was sharp, beautiful, and financially brilliant. She could read a balance sheet like a battlefield map. Julian hired her as CFO during the Series F expansion, when Virel was preparing for a $420 million acquisition by a health tech conglomerate called Northline. I liked her at first. That is another part people hate. They want the other woman to be a cartoon, a villain with red lipstick and a laugh sharp enough to cut glass. Celeste was not that. She sent handwritten thank you notes. She remembered staff birthdays. She once corrected a reporter who called Julian the sole founder and said, "Sloan Avery's patent trust is foundational to Virel's work." Julian never forgave her for saying it. Or maybe he loved her for becoming the next thing he could teach to erase me. The erasure began before the affair. Looking back, that is what hurts most. Celeste was not the start. She was the mirror. Julian had been rewriting me for years. At board dinners, he called me private. To investors, he called me non-operational. To employees, he called me the trust liaison, as if I were a polite document with earrings. When I challenged him, he said I hated attention and that he was protecting my peace. When I asked why my name had been removed from the company history page, he said marketing simplified complex origin stories. Complex origin stories. That was what he called my father's life's work. I should have pushed harder. I know that now, but love is good at disguising surrender as maturity. I thought I was choosing the marriage. I thought I was letting him shine because I did not need applause. I thought the license agreement protected enough. I thought ownership on paper could survive disrespect in public. Paper protects assets. It does not protect identity unless you are willing to use it. 2 months before our anniversary, Julian became tender again. Flowers on random Tuesdays. Coffee brought to my office. A weekend in Newport. Long conversations about how stressful the acquisition was and how he felt like he had lost us somewhere in the company's growth. He said, after the Northline deal closes, we should disappear for a week. Just us. That was why I booked Florence. I thought I was answering a prayer he had whispered. Instead, I was walking into the final scene of a play everyone else had been rehearsing. The morning of our anniversary, Julian kissed me in the kitchen and said he had a brutal day. He wore the navy suit I bought him for his first international keynote. I almost told him about the tickets then, but I wanted the surprise. I wanted the look on his face when I walked into his office. I wanted to prove we were still capable of beginning again. He left at 7:15. At 8:02, Celeste sent a company-wide calendar hold for an 11:30 atrium announcement. I did not see it because I was not on company staff distribution anymore, another tiny exclusion I had accepted because Julian said it reduced NUDs. At 11:38, I arrived with flowers. At 11:42, I watched my husband become another woman's fiancé under the logo my father's patents kept alive. The drive home after betrayal is strange because traffic does not know. A truck cuts you off. A child in the next car presses a sticker to the window. A radio host laughs about weekend weather. The world continues being ordinary while your life becomes evidence. I sat in the parking garage for 6 minutes before I could move. The flowers lay across the passenger seat, one stem broken. The Florence envelope rested in my lap. My phone was already buzzing, but not from Julian. Not yet. He was still upstairs, probably trying to invent a sentence that could make proposing to his CFO sound like a misunderstanding. I canceled the flights first. The airline representative said, "I hope everything is okay with your trip." I said, "The destination changed." Then I called the bank and froze every joint account requiring two-party review under our marital asset agreement. Julian had insisted on that structure years earlier to reassure my father that he would never exploit my trust funds. He had called it a romantic firewall. I remembered laughing. After the bank, I called Martin Hale. Martin had been my father's closest friend and the trustee of the Avery Biomedical Trust. He was 73, severe, and allergic to panic. He answered on the second ring. "Sloan?" My husband just got engaged to Celeste Vale in the Varel atrium. Silence, then a chair scraped. "Is this confirmed?" I was holding flowers. Another silence, shorter. "What do you need?" "Terminate the patent license." His breathing changed. "There is a 60-day cure period unless breach involves material misrepresentation, concealed control changes, or reputational damage tied to misuse of the licensed technology." Julian has been representing himself as primary inventor and sole controlling founder during the Northline acquisition. I know. That stopped me. "You know?" I suspected. "Your father suspected Julian would eventually confuse access with ownership. That is why the morality and attribution clauses exist." Morality clauses sound old-fashioned until the person using your family's intellectual property proposes to another executive in front of employees while calling himself the genius behind it. Martin continued. "If we initiate, Northline will pause diligence within the hour. Do it. Sloan, once filed, this cannot be treated as an emotional gesture. It becomes a legal event." I looked at my ring. My wedding band had left a small indentation in my finger. Proof of pressure over time. It already is. When I got home, I placed the flowers on the kitchen island and waited. Calls began at 12:26. Julian, Julian, Julian. Celeste, Julian. Board chair, unknown. Julian. General counsel, Julian. By 1:03, 164 missed calls. At 1:07, the doorbell rang. I did not open the door immediately. That may sound small, but for 10 years I had opened every door Julian stood behind. Angry door. Apology door. Business crisis door. Late night, come downstairs, I cannot sleep door. Doorways had been the architecture of our marriage, and I had always moved first. This time, I stood in the hallway and watched him through the side window. Julian looked terrible, still in the navy suit, tie crooked, hair disheveled, his face shiny with sweat despite the February cold. Behind him in the driveway, his car sat at an angle like he had abandoned it before finishing the parking job. His phone was pressed to his ear. He hung up, rang the bell again, then saw me through the glass. "Sloan," he said, "please." I opened the door with the chain still latched. His eyes dropped to the chain. "Good." "We need to talk," he said. "No." His gaze flicked toward the street. Our neighbors' homes sat behind winter trees. Julian hated being publicly uncontrolled. He had spent years perfecting approachable authority. Sleeves rolled at staff barbecues, champagne at product launches, quiet charity donations photographed only when useful. Begging through a door chain did not fit the brand. "It was not what you think," he said. I looked at him. He closed his eyes because even he heard it. "What part?" I asked. "The ring? The kiss? The banner? Or the receptionist asking if I was there for your engagement celebration?" He swallowed. Celeste did not know. That surprised me. Did not know what? That we were still together. Really together. Really together. I told her we were separated. "You slept beside me last night. I know. You kissed me this morning. I know. You let me walk into that lobby carrying anniversary flowers." His face twisted. "I did not know you were coming." Obviously. His phone buzzed again. He looked down and turned it away, but I saw Martin's name, then Northline Legal, then Celeste. His panic sharpened. "What did you do?" he whispered. "I protected my father's work. You cannot terminate the license. I can initiate breach review. Sloan, the acquisition depends on that license. I know. Hundreds of people work there. I know. Then how can you do this?" That was the moment I understood how completely he had mistaken me. He thought my restraint meant I did not understand power. He thought I had stayed quiet because I lacked leverage. He thought he could humiliate me in a building built on my father's patents and then ask me to protect the employees he used as a shield. "Julian," I said, "you proposed to another woman at work under the system my father invented." His mouth opened. No sound came, I continued. "You made the company a stage for your lie. Do not ask me to keep funding the lights." Behind him, another car turned onto our street. He stepped closer to the door to hide from the headlights. I did not move. Celeste arrived before Julian left. Her silver car pulled into the driveway behind his, and for one absurd second I thought of valet parking at Gallus, the two of them arriving like an event. She got out without a coat, still wearing the ivory suit from the proposal. The diamond ring was gone from her hand. That detail mattered. She walked toward the porch slowly, eyes red. Phone in one hand, Julian turned. "Celeste, do not." She ignored him. When she reached the door, she looked at me through the narrow opening and said, "I am sorry. Not I did not know first. Not let me explain. Sorry." That kept me from closing the door. Julian said, "This is not the time." Celeste looked at him with such cold disgust that he actually stepped back. "You told me she lived in Boston," she said. I laughed once. I could not help it. "I live in this house. I know that now. You never searched me?" Shame crossed her face. "I did. He told me the articles were old, that the separation was private because of the acquisition, that you remained on trust documents for continuity." "Trust documents," I repeated. Julian's jaw clenched. "Celeste." She held up her phone. "You also told Northline the patent license renewal was guaranteed." My eyes moved to him. "That was new." He said nothing. Celeste continued, voice trembling now. "You represented in acquisition diligence that there were no attribution disputes, no pending marital claims, no controlling party conflicts, and no moral clause concerns. Martin would love that list," I asked. Did you sign that? Celeste looked at Julian. He did. Julian said, everyone understood those clauses were formalities. I smiled then, not because I was happy. Because my father had once told me arrogant men often die on the word formality. Celeste turned to me. The board is convening at 3. Northline paused diligence. They need you. Julian jumped in. What they need is for Sloane to stop acting out of emotion. Celeste's expression changed. She watched her husband propose to another woman in public. Celeste, and you are still trying to make her the governance risk. The porch went silent. For the first time since the atrium, I felt something besides pain. Not affection for Celeste, not forgiveness, recognition. She had been lied to, yes. She had also been smart enough to stop standing where the lie placed her. I unlatched the chain. Julian exhaled in relief and moved forward. I held up one hand. Not you. Then I opened the door wider and looked at Celeste. You can come in. Success sat at my kitchen island across from the dead flowers. Julian stayed on the porch because I told him if he entered, I would call security, and because my neighbor Mrs. Donnelly had begun watering a plant that did not exist near her front window. Julian noticed too. He left after 12 minutes of pacing, phone calls, and one final look through the glass that tried to be heartbreak but landed closer to calculation. Inside, Celeste placed a tablet on the island. I need to show you what he filed. Her hands shook as she opened the diligence folder. The Northline acquisition was larger than I had realized. $420 million base purchase, with earnouts tied to regulatory adoption. Varel's value depended almost entirely on the Avery compression and diagnostic routing patents. Without them, the platform was impressive, but not defensible. Competitors could replicate most of it within a year. Julian had represented the patent license as perpetual. It was not. He had represented attribution as uncontested. It was not. He had represented the trust controller, me, as supportive and inactive. I was neither. He had included a founder narrative naming himself as originating architect of the core routing method. That was not just insulting. It was legally suicidal. I read the paragraph 3 times. Celeste watched my face. I swear I did not draft that section. Who did? Julian gave it to legal as founder background. Did no one check? He controlled founder history. I controlled financials. Legal assumed the patent summaries matched prior decks. Prior decks, years of erasure turned into acquisition documentation. Celeste scrolled lower. There is more. Expense schedules. Apartment lease classified as executive transition housing. Engagement event costs booked under culture and retention. The ring, thankfully, was not company funded. Small mercies in expensive disasters. Then she opened a folder labeled Governance Transition. Inside were documents proposing that, after acquisition close, Julian would become Northline's Chief Innovation Officer, Celeste would remain CFO through integration, and the Avery Trust would receive payout under existing license terms with no future approval rights. No future approval rights. My father's work turned into a passive royalty stream, while Julian stepped onto a bigger stage. I sat back. Celeste said quietly, "He told me you wanted that. I wanted my husband." Her face crumpled. For a moment neither of us spoke. Then my phone rang. Martin. I answered on speaker. Sloane? Northline wants emergency confirmation from the trust. What do they want confirmed? Whether we intend to cure or terminate. Celeste looked at me. I looked at the flowers. Neither, I said. We attend the board meeting and make them tell the truth first. Martin was silent for a beat. Then he said, Your father would enjoy this version of you. At 3 o'clock, I joined the emergency board meeting from my kitchen table. Celeste sat off camera to my left. Martin appeared from his office. Julian appeared from the executive conference room at Virel, alone beneath a wall of awards that suddenly looked like borrowed props. The board chair, Marianne Holt, opened the meeting with the voice of someone trying not to sound like the ship had hit something. Thank you, everyone. We are here to address a material issue regarding the Northline transaction, the Avery patent license, and executive conduct. Executive conduct, the corporate phrase for detonating your marriage under a balloon arch. Marianne looked at me through the screen. Mrs. Avery, I interrupted gently. Ms. Avery, a tiny correction. A large one. She nodded. Mrs. Avery, can you confirm the trust-initiated breach review this afternoon? Yes. Julian leaned forward. Under emotional circumstances. Martin said, under contractual circumstances. Marianne turned to him. Mr. Hale? On what basis? Martin began listing clauses. Attribution breach. Material misrepresentation. Misuse of licensed technology in acquisition narratives. Failure to disclose controlling trust dependence. Reputational harm tied to executive misconduct. Concealed relationship with CFO during active acquisition diligence. Possible false statements to Northline. No drama. Just terms. I watched Julian shrink under nouns. Then Marianne asked the question that changed the room. Mr. Voss, did you knowingly represent to Northline that the Avery Trust license was effectively perpetual and uncontested? Julian looked at me first. That was his mistake. Everyone saw it. I believed Sloan would support the transaction. That was not the question. Marianne said. He swallowed. Yes. Celeste closed her eyes. The general counsel asked, did you represent Ms. Avery as inactive in company governance? Yes, historically? Did you disclose that Ms. Avery controls the trust with authority to initiate breach review? Julian hesitated. No. Silence after that. No was different from every silence before it. It was the sound of money stopping. A Northline representative joined halfway through the call. He had the expression of a man whose weekend had been murdered. He said Northline was pausing all acquisition activity pending review. Financing would be suspended. Regulatory filings would be delayed. Any public announcement postponed. Julian said, this will destroy momentum. I finally spoke. No. Julian, this reveals what momentum was standing on. His eyes flashed. You are enjoying this. I looked at him for a long moment. I brought you flowers this morning. No one spoke after that. The investigation began that night. Not because I demanded revenge. Because money demands documentation faster than heartbreak does. Northline requested full diligence review. The Varel board hired outside counsel. Martin opened the trust archive. Celeste recused herself from any decision tied to Julian and submitted a written statement about their relationship, what he told her and what she believed. She did not protect herself elegantly. That earned my respect. Elegant statements hide too much. Julian was placed on administrative leave by 6:40 p.m. His access card was deactivated by 7:05. By 7:12, someone at Virel had sent a photo to half the company. Julian leaving through the side entrance, carrying a laptop bag and no dignity. I did not leak it. I did not need to. The next morning, Martin came to my house with 3 boxes. My father's original notebooks. I had not seen them in years. Brown leather covers, blue ink, margin notes, coffee stains, little diagrams of data pathways drawn with the impatient genius of a man whose hand could not move as fast as his mind. Martin placed them on my kitchen table with the reverence of a priest, setting down relics. Your father anticipated derivative misuse, he said. Of course he did. He wrote a memo before the first license. I think you should read it. The memo was 5 pages, typed, with handwritten notes at the bottom. If Virel succeeds, Julian will eventually be credited for what he can explain better than what he can build. Sloan may permit this for love, exhaustion, or privacy. The license must protect not only revenue but attribution. Invention can be stolen by applause as surely as by paperwork. I had to put the page down. Dad had known me too well. He had known I might make myself small to keep peace. He had built legal walls where he feared my emotional ones would fail. There was a note at the bottom in his handwriting. Sloan, if you are reading this because someone forgot, make them remember. I cried then. Not pretty tears. Not cinematic ones. The kind that make your nose run and your chest hurt. Celeste had sent 3 messages asking if I needed documents. Northline wanted a call. Julian had left 7 voicemails. The board needed a path forward. But for 10 minutes, I was just a daughter sitting with proof that her father had protected her from a future she had not wanted to imagine. Then I wiped my face, called Martin back into the room, and said, we make them remember publicly. Publicly did not mean scandal. That was important. Julian had built his defense around the idea that I was a humiliated wife acting from rage. If I went public with emotion first, he could keep that frame. So we moved like ice. Outside counsel reviewed the origin narrative. Forensic IP specialists compared Julian's acquisition claims to Dad's notebooks. Communications auditors pulled internal decks where my name and the trust had been removed over time. Finance reviewed apartment expenses, engagement event coding, and acquisition representations. HR interviewed employees about whether they knew Julian was married. Most did not. One engineer, Priya, told investigators, "I thought Sloane Avery was dead." That sentence reached me through the report and made me sit down dead. Not absent, not private. Dead. That was the size of the erasure. Julian had not just minimized me. He had let an entire company forget I was alive while using my father's patents to raise valuation. Celeste called after reading the same testimony. "I am sorry," she said. "I know, no, Sloane. I thought I was stepping into a future. I did not know I was standing on someone's grave. I did not comfort her, but I did not hang up. There will be a board session Friday," I said. "Tell the truth there." "I will, even if it ends your career?" "Yes." It did not end her career. Not because there were no consequences, but because truth told before forced discovery lands differently than truth dragged out by subpoena. Celeste admitted she had entered a relationship with Julian believing he was separated. She acknowledged poor judgment in allowing the engagement event inside the company. She disclosed every document he had given her. She apologized to employees for letting personal belief compromise executive perception. Then she did what Julian never managed. She took responsibility without using passive voice. Julian's attorneys tried to argue that the company history language was marketing, not legal attribution. Martin responded by projecting my father's patent diagrams beside Julian's founder architecture slides. Even through video, the theft of credit looked obvious. Marianne, the board chair, asked me what the trust wanted. I said, "Correction, financial, historical." She blinked. I continued, "The money can be negotiated. The record cannot." The correction came in 3 parts. First, Varel issued an internal statement acknowledging that its core routing and compression framework was licensed from the Avery Biomedical Trust, based on patents developed by Dr. Elliot Avery, with continued trust participation under Sloane Avery. It was not a press release yet, internal first. The people who had applauded Julian deserved to learn where the floor actually began. Second, Julian resigned from all company roles under investigation settlement terms. The word resigned was generous. Removed would have been more accurate. His unvested compensation was cancelled. His founder title entered review. He agreed not to represent himself as inventor of the licensed technology. Civil claims remained open. Third, Northline reopened acquisition talks, but under entirely new terms. The trust would not be bought out passively. The Avery patents would remain licensed under strengthened attribution, ethics, and governance clauses. I would take a board seat with veto rights over any sale or derivative license involving the core framework. A percentage of proceeds would fund rural clinic technology grants in my father's name. That last part was mine. Julian had wanted a bigger stage. I wanted the work to reach the people Dad built it for. On Friday afternoon, Varel held an all-hands meeting. I attended in person for the first time in years. Walking into that lobby again was harder than I expected. The receptionist was different, or maybe the same and simply terrified now. The atrium had been stripped of balloons. No violinist, no engagement flowers. Just rows of employees and a stage that looked smaller without illusion decorating it. Whispers moved when I entered. Some people recognized me. Some did not. One young engineer looked at me like I was a ghost returning to correct a file. Marianne spoke first. Then Celeste. Celeste stood on stage in a black suit. No ring, no softness added for pity. I participated in a public moment that humiliated someone whose role in this company had been hidden from many of you, she said. I believed false information. That does not remove my responsibility to correct it. Then she turned toward me. Sloane Avery is not a footnote in this company's story. Her father's work is the foundation of our platform, and her trust's license is the reason this company exists in its current form. The room was silent. Then someone clapped. Priya, the engineer who thought I was dead. One clap became many. I stood there with my hands at my sides, accepting applause I should never have had to earn back. Julian called that night. I almost did not answer. Then I did, because some conversations are not for reconciliation. They are for confirmation. His voice sounded smaller. I saw the all hands. Of course you did. They erased me. No, they corrected you. He was quiet. Then he said, "You could have left me something." I looked around my living room. The Florence envelope was still on the console table, unopened now, meaningless. "I left you years of credit for work that was not yours. That is not fair. No." "Julian, it was not." He breathed into the phone. I could hear traffic behind him. Maybe he was outside the apartment he had leased to support his lie. Maybe a hotel, maybe nowhere. "I loved you," he said. "I know. I just needed to become someone." "You became someone who could propose to another woman while your wife held flowers in the lobby." He made a broken sound. For the first time, I did not move toward it. That had been my role for too long. Hear his pain, soften the consequence. Make room for his humanity before mine had been acknowledged. "Not this time," he said. "Are you going to forgive me?" I thought about Dad's memo. Celeste's pale face, Priya's clap, the receptionist, the banner. The moment Julian saw me and still did not step off the stage. "I do not know," I said, "but I am done financing your version of me." I hung up, the divorce filed Monday. Because of the prenuptial agreement, the trust protections, and Julian's misconduct, the legal process was less dramatic than people might imagine. It was not painless. Pain hides in stupid places. A coffee mug he bought me in Lisbon. His running shoes near the back door. A password prompt asking for our anniversary. The dog waiting by the garage at 6 p.m. for a car that would not pull in anymore. But pain is not the same as doubt. I missed the man I thought I married. I did not want the one who had existed instead. Celeste remained CFO after an independent review, though she lost her acquisition bonus and spent months rebuilding employee trust. Some people judged me for not demanding her removal. They wanted cleaner revenge. But Celeste had not forged the erasure. She had benefited from a lie, then helped expose it. Accountability is not the same size for everyone. Julian had wanted me to hate her so the story could stay about two women. I refused. The story was about the man who lied to both, and the system that believed the loudest founder over the quiet owner. There is one scene from the early company days that I kept remembering after everything. It was winter, year 2, before funding, before office glass, before anyone used the word disruption without embarrassment. Julian and I were in the rented room above the dental clinic during a snowstorm. The heat had gone out, the internet was unstable, and the prototype kept failing when packet loss reached a certain threshold. I was sitting on the floor in my coat with Dad's notebook open on my knees, trying to translate a margin equation he had written at 3 a.m. years before. Julian brought me gas station coffee and said, "One day people are going to know what you built." I remember looking up at him and believing him completely. That is the cruelty of later erasure. It does not always come from someone who never saw you. Sometimes it comes from the person who saw you first, benefited most, and then decided the world would reward him more if you became invisible. After Dad died, Julian stopped saying people would know what I built. He started saying people did not need to know every detail. Then he said investors preferred clean founder narratives. Then he said I looked uncomfortable in interviews anyway. Each sentence sounded reasonable if heard alone. Together, they formed a disappearance. I helped him write the first version of that disappearance because I was grieving and tired. That is why the public correction mattered. Not for ego, for the woman on the floor in her winter coat, still believing the man with the coffee would tell the truth later. Martin told me later that my father had never fully trusted Julian. That hurt, because I wished he had said it plainly when he was alive. Then again, would I have listened? Probably not. Love is a very talented defense attorney. It objects to evidence, dismisses witnesses, and asks for continuance after continuance until years have passed. Dad had expressed his concern in documents instead. The license had attribution clauses stronger than industry standard, cure provisions tied to public correction, transfer restrictions that survived acquisition, a morality clause that mentioned reputational misuse, concealed executive conflicts, and improper representation of inventorship. I used to think those provisions were Dad being old school and dramatic. Martin told me Dad called them Sloan clauses. "He knew you," Martin said. I sat in his office with the old memo in front of me, unable to decide whether to laugh or cry. "He thought I would be weak." "No," Martin said. "He thought you would be generous. That was worse somehow and kinder." Generosity had been the language I used to explain my own shrinking. I was generous with credit, generous with access, generous with forgiveness before anyone asked properly. Generous with the benefit of the doubt until doubt was the only benefit left. Dad had not tried to make me less generous. He had built a lock for the door generosity might forget to close. I wish I could thank him for that. Maybe using the clause was the thank you. The employees' reactions came in waves. The first wave was shock. Anonymous messages, private apologies. People who had worked 10 feet from the company history wall and never questioned why my name had slowly disappeared. One engineer wrote, "I am sorry." I repeated a story I never verified. A customer success manager said, "I once told a new hire Julian built the original routing engine. I did not know." Priya sent the shortest message. I know now. The second wave was anger, not at me, at him, at the company, at themselves. Younger employees felt duped. Older employees remembered me from the first office and began correcting everyone loudly, with the aggressive satisfaction of people who had been waiting for permission to say what they knew. One warehouse manager named Ben called me and said, "I still have the first viral mug. It had your initials on the bottom because you ordered them." I had forgotten. He sent a photo. There it was, VA01, Viral Avery, first batch. I cried over a coffee mug. That is the thing about being erased. Restoration arrives through strange objects. A mug, an old deck, a notebook, a line in a license. A person saying, "I remember you were there." The third wave was discomfort. People did not know how to talk to me when I came back into the building. They overcorrected. Ms. Avery this, Ms. Avery that. Doors opened too quickly. Assistants asked if I wanted water every 6 minutes. I wanted to tell them I was not royalty. I was simply no longer dead in their minds. So I started eating lunch in the cafeteria once a week, not to perform humility, to become ordinary in the company I had helped build. Celeste and I had the strangest almost friendship after the investigation. We were not friends exactly. Too much had happened. But we understood something no one else could. We both had loved different versions of the same man, and both versions were designed by him. Mine was the visionary partner who needed quiet support. Hers was the lonely separated founder who had been emotionally abandoned by a wife who kept legal control out of spite. Those stories were not identical, but they used the same structure: make Julian central, make the woman responsible, make his ambition look like survival. During the acquisition renegotiation, Celeste and I worked across the same conference table for 14 straight days. At first, every silence was awkward. Then work took over. She was excellent at numbers. I was excellent at the patent history and strategy. Together, we found weaknesses in Northline's revised offer and pushed back hard enough that their lead negotiator joked he wished we disliked each other more. Celeste smiled politely and said, "So do several men." That was the first time I laughed with her. Not forgiveness, not sisterhood. Just a moment where the absurdity of being placed in competition by a man who lied to both of us became too obvious to ignore. One night, after a brutal negotiation call, she said, "I should have known." I said, "Maybe, but he also should have told the truth." She nodded. "I am still responsible for what I did not verify." Yes, she accepted that. That acceptance became the reason I could work with her. Accountability does not erase harm. But it makes a room usable again. 6 months later, the Northline deal closed. Not for $420 million. For $388 million plus a long-term licensing structure that gave the Avery Biomedical Trust more control, more revenue, and more public attribution than the original deal ever had. Reporters called it a surprising governance win. Analysts called it a disciplined IP protection move. One columnist wrote, "The Avery Trust turned a personal scandal into a stronger transaction." They were not wrong, but they were incomplete. I did not turn scandal into strategy because I was clever. I did it because the alternative was letting humiliation be the final page. I had spent years allowing my work, my father's work, and my name to be softened into background. The proposal forced a choice I should have made sooner: be polite or be present. I chose present. At the closing ceremony, Northline displayed a new origin video. It opened not with Julian on stage, but with my father in a lab in 1998, sleeves rolled up, explaining data loss over rural networks to a room of doctors who looked half bored and half confused. Then it showed the patents, the early license, the first Varel prototype. Julian appeared too, because truth did not require pretending he had never contributed. He had sold, led, raised money, built teams. He had also lied. The video ended with the Avery Rural Systems Fund. I cried quietly. Celeste stood beside me and said, "He would be proud." I did not ask how she knew. Maybe some truths are visible once the lies stop standing in front of them. After the ceremony, I flew to Florence alone. Not the same hotel, not the same itinerary. I stayed across the river in a small room with green shutters and a view of laundry lines between buildings. I ate pasta at a place with 8 tables. I bought a sketch of the Duomo from an old man who told me my Italian was terrible, but my shoes were practical. I laughed more in 4 days than I had in 4 months. On the final night, I opened the anniversary card I had written to Julian. 10 years and I would still choose you. I read it once, then I tore it into small pieces and dropped them into a trash bin near the Arno. Not because love had been fake. Because the woman who wrote that sentence did not yet know she was allowed to choose herself. Near the end of this video, I want to ask you something directly. I pinned a question in the comments. If you walked into your husband's office with anniversary flowers and found him proposing to another woman, would you confront him publicly or walk away and use the power he forgot you had? Go to that pinned comment and tell me your honest opinion. I want to know what you would do in Sloane's place. And if this story made you think of a woman erased from the things she helped build, stay close to. She chose herself. Every voice here helps another quiet survivor remember that being unseen is not the same as being powerless. I brought flowers and Florence tickets to surprise my husband. He gave another woman a ring under my father's logo. I walked away. Then I terminated the patent license that held his empire together. 37 minutes later, my phone showed 164 missed calls. The doorbell rang, but by then, the most important door had already closed. The one where I kept letting him walk in and call my silence love.